On the hospitality side, like our front desk and our concierges, like they're there to serve and meet every guest need. They want to know if it's your birthday when you're staying at our hotel or if it's an anniversary. They know if you prefer red versus white wine, so that's what they can deliver to you. They definitely have that authority and we want them to. We give our employees the power to like really surprise and delight and make sure that the guests walk away with the best experience.
You're listening to the Trust Builders podcast, brought to you by Adoreboard.
Alrighty, well, you're all very welcome to today's episode of Trust Builders. Got a really amazing guest here today, Katy, who is responsible for customer experience at Aspen. You're very welcome, Katy. We're just going to come to you in a second just with a bit of an introduction. So today's session is all about, I suppose, the brand promise of Aspen. You know, Aspen is world famous. We often think about it as the mountain, right? But actually there's a lot more that Katy's going to unfold. And really we're thinking about the lessons from delivering a world-class customer experience. Thinking about that idea of unreasonable hospitality. Both Alex, Katy and myself were hanging out at X4. We got to hear the talk around unreasonable hospitality. And then Katy started telling us all the amazing things that are happening in Aspen. We're going, oh my God, we need to get Katy on the Trust Builders. So Katy, you're very welcome. So you're responsible for CX at Aspen One. Do you just want to give the audience just a quick overview of who you are, what you do at Aspen?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you, Chris and Alex, for having me on this podcast. And thank you, everyone who is tuning in. As Chris said, I run the customer insights program for Aspen One, and Aspen One makes up the ski resort, which most people are familiar with, which is Aspen Snowmass, and houses 4 different mountains that people can choose to ski or snowboard or visit, which is Aspen Mountain, Snowmass, Aspen Highlands, and Buttermilk. And then within that brand of Aspen Snowmass, we also operate and own all of the on-mountain restaurants. So we have 19 food and beverage outlets. We also own 4Mountain Sports, which is equipment rental and retail locations. We have 9 of those spread across all 4 mountains and the 2 towns of Aspen and Snowmass Village. We have the ski and snowboard schools of Aspen Snowmass, which is just our lessons. And we run lessons in the winter and in the summer for learning how to bike. And then on top of that portfolio, so that's the Aspen Snowmass side, we also oversee, or that's the Aspen Snowmass side, and then we also oversee Aspen Hospitality, which has 2 hotel brands within it. So we have the Little Nell, which is our 5-star, 5-diamond property, and then we have the Limelight portfolio, and that has 4 locations that are in Aspen, Snowmass, and then we have a location in Ketchum, Idaho, and then one in downtown Denver. We are opening another location in Boulder here in the fall, and then we'll be expanding to California and opening a location in Mammoth. So that's all very exciting. And then we also, because that's not enough, we have Aspen Collection, which is a retail and brand where we create clothing and we sell that both at some brick and mortar stores and online where people can take a bit of Aspen home with them.
Superb. My ears pricked at the 5-star, 5-diamond. You're going to have to let us know what the food tastes like there. It sounds pretty spectacular, right?
Yeah, the Little Nell is a very special property. We, I think, are one of the longest running 5-star, 5-diamond hotels, at least in the state, along with the Broadmoor over in Colorado Springs, but that's a Forbes rating. And it's very prestigious. We're the only one in Aspen to have that rating. And along with that comes just we call it the 5-star standard. So everyone who works there is trained to the 5-star standard. You receive 5-star service when you're there, and the food is incredible. There's 2 main restaurants at that property, and then we have like an opera bar and a wine bar. It's a really cool spot. Even if you're not staying there, just to go get a drink and enjoy the lobby or their patio in the summer.
Super. We're going to have to, Alex, do our next podcast from that particular establishment. But Alex, this is a long-awaited podcast talking about hospitality and the idea of engineering a system. What Katy's actually going to describe here, I think, is really an end-to-end CX engine. And I know hospitality is a kind of lens and a passion for you to look through CX. Maybe just kind of, I suppose, provide a quick overview of why hospitality from your perspective is really important before we jump in.
Oh, thank you, Chris, and thank you so much, Katie. I still remember our conversations in Salt Lake City. As Chris said, yeah, I'm a big fan of the idea of hospitality as a operating system for any business, not just restaurants, hotels, but any business. I think that can be one of the lessons from this podcast. And you know, Aspen is such a beloved name and a household name, and not by chance, right? It's by strategy. And I had working for the Active Network a few years ago. I had a chance to come and visit and do some research on Aspen, I was amazed at just the strategies and the approaches you guys pick are very deliberate and are very different from other such destinations, and I think that's what makes you unique.
Yeah, what I love as I got to learn, you're what's known as a lofty. Katie, you started working the lifts back in the day, and I suppose it attracts people who have a passion for the outdoors, and certainly that's translated through the experience. So maybe get us into why you chose Aspen. You went there as a summer. It's one of those things that you recommend. We were laughing there about our first time jobs in previous episodes, but it seems that you caught the snowing bug and have stayed there ever since, right?
Yeah, basically. I did grow up pretty close to Aspen. We call it down the valley, but I grew up about an hour away. So even growing up, like I was learning how to snowboard. I'm a snowboarder. I started out skiing, but like we would come up to Aspen and take our turns I've been exposed to Aspen for a very long time, but straight out of college I went to college in LA because I'm from Colorado. I had to leave, but right after that I came back to Aspen, and I was a lift attendant at Aspen Highlands, and it's to this day one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. I can't encourage enough young people, if you're looking at a gap year or something to do right after college, go work at any ski resort. You'll have the time of your life. But yeah, so that's where I got my start with Aspen One, is on the mountains. We call it the front lines. You're right there with the guest. You're giving that guest experience every day. And I had a lot of fun. We had a great time being lift attendants, and it was a long time ago. But
I suppose it's just to correct myself, it's lifty rather than lofty. So
we call it lifty. Well, that's like the slang term is like we were lifties, but like technically you're a lift attendant.
good. I suppose that really prepared you for stepping into CX. And maybe if we talk through, we were talking about the idea of a hygiene factor, table stakes, and then this kind of magic that Aspen is able to deliver. Maybe if we start at kind of the hygiene factors, we talked about, how you even prepare people getting on the lifts right through to efficient rentals and the small acts of courtesy that actually build into a broader experience. Maybe start with some of what you would call, I suppose, the hygiene factors for really world-class customer experience.
So we've had our customer surveys around for a very long time, luckily. So we've been able to kind of, study what our guest pain points are and, what we need to pay attention to really ensure that they have a great vacation. As you said, we are a world-class destination, and we know that when you come to Aspen, it might be, your only vacation for that year. And so we really want to honor that and make sure that you have the best vacation ever. A huge ethos and one of our brand pillars is we want our guests to return to their homes transformed or leave transformed. It's very important to us. So with that, in our customer experience surveys, we look at every single point of potential friction and try to solve for that. So you kind of briefly mentioned it, our lot to lifts. We started these survey questions in our broader survey about 4 years ago. And we really wanted to look at what is delaying our guests from, getting onto the mountain and taking those first turns of the day. And we wanted to reduce those pain points if we could. So we asked, did you experience any delays? And if so, what were those delays? And through asking these questions, one of the major pain points or friction points that we discovered is guests spend a lot of time in the morning getting their rentals for their first day of skiing. And as much as we try to make that process efficient for them, it just takes a while. You have to come in and get fitted for your boots. You have to spend time with your rental tech so they can understand what actual level of a skier you are, so they can properly set your bindings. And then you have to sign waivers and all the paperwork that goes with that. And then if you're a family of 4, you just have times that by however much, it just takes time. So one of the things that we started doing is we allow our guests, if they're renting from Four Mountain Sports, one of our rental locations, to pick up the rentals the day before their first day of skiing or snowboarding. So starting at 2 o'clock, you can go into any of our locations, pick up your rentals for the next day. And then on top of that, we'll even take your rentals to the mountain you're going to go to the next day, whether it be Aspen Mountain, Snowmass, Highlands, or Buttermilk. We'll transfer them for you so you can walk out of the shop and not have to carry these big, awkward things all around town and back to your hotel. So once we started asking those questions and inserting that sort of solution, we saw those wait times decrease. So that's been a really cool thing to do. Another pain point is we're a small town. We're a historic mining town, so there's only so big our footprint can be. So parking is really limited in Aspen and Snowmass. So in our app, before you leave in the morning, you can check the parking lot status to see if it's full or not. And that way you don't drive all the way out, which isn't very far, to any of our mountains and be like, there's nowhere to park. So you can kind of navigate those situations ahead of time. So.
And it sounds that you guys are almost like an F1 kind of engineers in the pit, in terms of really thinking about the process that stops people getting onto the mountains. I love that idea of being able to get the time down from the lot to lift, which is quite a catchy thing. Parking lot is it's the shortened version there. But that for me, Alex, is a really good example of there's this broad process, right? But getting to the experience, they've identified these two kind of key pain points. And what seems to have done is taken acts of courtesy to actually improve that.
I think that's right, Chris, and great examples, Katie. I think that's, to me, the main point here is that, I mean, there's only that much you can do in certain situations. You can't reclaim more land and build more, right? Parking spots, but you can alleviate the anxiety of people, right? So the anxiety of, is there going to be parking spot, right? That's, where I've read about one of the big innovations of Uber was not so much speeding up the arrival, but giving you insight into where the car is, right? So getting rid of that anxiety, nagging feeling, and you guys are doing a great job in terms of even this acts of generosity, right? That we're going to do this for you. You don't have to pay extra, right? I think that's what sets apart the exceptional experience.
I love that. And I think what I was really fascinated in is the attention to detail. And what about the seats when you get on, and what's the punch card to make sure the seats are sitting nicely, Katie, just from an experience perspective?
Yeah, it comes up in our comments every year. We try and do it every year. What Chris was talking about is one of the things guests hate the most when they come and ski and snowboard on our mountains if there's snow on the seat of the lift. So we always make sure that our lift attendants are trained to sweep those seats if it's snowing. So because guests can sit down on a somewhat dry seat, because there's nothing worse than taking a few laps and having a soggy bum. Like, you don't want that. So we're really, really good about it. But if there's anyone ever slacking, it is one of the first things to show up in our comments for sure. Is like, oh, the seats weren't swept. So it's something we definitely pay attention to and train to.
I think that's a great insight, because it seems something small, but it kind of marks the start of your experience, right? And if you're run about with, the experience slightly dampened by the snow, that can certainly be uncomfortable. So it feels that getting the hygiene, part of the magic that you guys have is it's interconnected. You have this integration between the hotels, to the rental, to the network, to the mountain. You're then delivering the actual product to get them ready to go to the mountain. So maybe if we then think about the differentiation, and I love this idea of ambassadors. Could you maybe just chat through who are the ambassadors? What's their role? What are the small things that they're doing to bring joy to your customers?
Yes, so our on-mountain ambassadors are part of Aspen Snowmass. So they're amazing employees that we have, and anyone who ever interacts with our ambassadors, they rate us the highest in any of our scores. So they're stationed at the bottom of every mountain and then at the top. So in the morning when you're going to catch the lift for the first time, you can stop, and they offer free coffee and cider every morning without fail. So if you didn't get enough caffeine or just need something warm, you can stop and get that, and they'll answer any questions you have about, like, hey, what do you think is riding best today? And they're happy to do that. And then the ambassadors on top of the mountain, They're handing out sunscreen because a lot of people don't realize in the winter you can still get very sunburned and we want to protect you, especially at our elevation. So they'll be giving you sunscreen, they'll be giving you more cider if you need it, trail maps. And then the really cool thing that they do is they offer free tours of our mountains. So if it's your first time or doesn't matter your 50th time and you just not sure where you want to go or maybe like some good local runs, they'll take you on that tour. So it's a really cool experience that we offer for our guests. Yeah, to show them the best parts of our mountain.
Yeah, I know our kids would give you a +1 on the hot cocoa, and I'm sure myself and Alex would enjoy it. I don't know if it's warm cider, but maybe a cider anyway. So that sounds amazing. It feels that, and maybe Alex, you can maybe comment on this, is the idea of giving employees permission, right? So instead of the ambassadors, simply helping people on mountains, they transform into these personalized guides, right? So they're assessing the level of expertise with the skiers. They're then taking them to these unique parts of the mountain, depending on their preference. So that idea of personalization, could you maybe just chat to that point around giving employees permission to serve? And we often kind of nickel and dime in this, but I think Aspen's a really good example where they don't.
Yeah, I would say our employees have permission to serve across all of our brands. So the On Mountain Ambassadors is a really good example, kind of what you just said. They're free to take them, down any run that they think that they'll have a good time and that they're capable of. On the hospitality side, like our front desk and our concierges, like they're there, to serve and meet every guest need. They want to know, if it's your birthday when you're staying at our hotel or if it's an anniversary. And then they want to make sure they know if you prefer red versus white wine, so that's what they can deliver to you. They definitely have that authority and we want them to. And then, on the rental side or the lesson side, like it's just we give our employees the power to like really surprise and delight and make sure that the guests walk away with the best experience.
I would love, Alex, your perspective on this. You have observed how employee experience really impacts the customer. Could you maybe just reflect on what you've heard?
Absolutely. And I just wanted to confirm with Katie because that's what I was my understanding with the lessons back in the day when we did the research, and it was for the software side of things, right? Because the Active Network was the software partner of Aspen at the time. And I was able to compare Aspen to Whistler, for example, very interesting contrasts. But my understanding of especially the lessons was that the instructors were encouraged. First of all, they were paired in a personalized way to the guest according to various criteria, and then they were encouraged throughout the year to keep in touch with them. And if that's true, you can tell us if that's true, but to me that is a brilliant strategy, because that, if you think about luxury, what defines it is not necessarily the item. Sometimes, I mean, part of it is the item, but it's the personal touch and the human interaction.
Yeah, definitely. All of what you said is true. And we really pride ourselves on our ski and snowboard school. They are one of the main pillars of the Aspen Snowmass brand and one of the huge influencers of getting our guests to return. And so, yeah, though, before you take a lesson, if it's your first time, there's a whole questionnaire that you fill out. We have lesson reservationists who like call you and really do make sure you're matched up with the right instructor. We have instructors that speak, I forgot, it fluctuates every year, but usually between 15 and 20 different languages, so they can give you a lesson in your own language. And then, yeah, if those instructors are really encouraged to form personal relationships, and we have instructors that have been instructors for over 30 years, and it's because they just take the same family every single year and they've taught, the grandparents all the way through to the grandkids. So they're really special relationships that get formed with our ski instructors.
Alex, that was a great addition there. I really appreciate that. And I suppose that goes on to the idea of recognition. Maybe you can just chat very quickly about how you recognize the people who have gone above and beyond for your customers.
Yeah, we have a lot of different ways we try to recognize our employees. I think anyone in the hospitality and guest service will say that it's sometimes a thankless job and it's a very difficult job to always be smiling and, on it for the customer, who could be a very polite customer or all the way to like the worst customer you've ever had to deal with. So we really try to take care of our employees, and our customer surveys are one way to do that. So, in our open text comments, if there's ever, an employee that gets mentioned, our managers meet every Monday and they share our guest surveys with everyone. And so they're the first to say that they use the surveys to reward and recognize employees. And they do small things like, buying them gift cards for lunch or, letting them take an extra 15-minute break, what have you. But it's our employees are what makes our brand. And so we very much try to take care of them. And our surveys is just one way that we're able to, give them the applause that they need, especially when, sometimes you don't know that someone's going above and beyond, but when a customer tells you, it's very meaningful.
Superb. And it feels that it is just embedded in the culture of the organization to have that reflex, right? When a customer has a problem, it's almost like an automatic reflex to solve for. And it feels that it's everyone's responsibility. So the ambassadors can flip into different roles depending on the problem being faced by the customer, right? Is that part of it? The ability to flex and, to serve the customer in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to serve them like within their own like what they're doing. I don't think an ambassador is going to try to help someone get their rental equipment, but they will show them where the building is definitely and get them situated in the right spot. But yeah, we really give our employees agency to make the guest experience. Like I said, our ethos is to have our guests return home transformed. And so, to do that, you have to be willing to go above and beyond to make sure that guest's needs are satisfied, that they're having a great vacation.
I just want to talk about that philosophy of return transformed that kind of speaks to this idea of mind, body, and spirit. Can we talk maybe about this broader offering that you have? There's art, there's personalization right across, various elements. And obviously, you guys take a fairly proactive stance on the environment and sustainability being super, super important to what you guys do. Maybe just chat through what that is translated. It seems like a very lofty brand goal, but maybe you could kind of work out, well, how do you achieve that? How is that actually recognized as a goal accomplished?
Yeah, definitely. It is lofty, but I think anyone who's ever come to Aspen can maybe understand it. For a long time, just the town of Aspen has had this thing, it's called the Aspen idea, and it's an untangible thing. Like it's really hard to put into words. And for us, we kind of translated it into, well, the Aspen idea is this idea that you come and visit here and it does affect your mind, body, and spirit. And so, but what does that mean? And how can we tap into that to provide an excellent, guest experience? And so that's where we came away with Return Transformed. But Aspen itself is a magical and unique and diverse place. Like I said, we're a historic mining town. So our downtown still has all those historic buildings. It's very special to go and walk through there. We are a vibrant, arts and cultural scene. We have an amazing museum that's free to the public. We have all these art galleries with amazing artists that are free to walk in. We have two music and concert venues that bring in world-class names, and they're both intimate. So you get a really cool experience when you go to one of their shows there. We also we have all this nature. It's in our backyard, and there's something about the mountains here that are just so special and transformative. So we try to take all of that and be cognizant of all the things this place has to offer and really honor this place. We really want to honor Aspen. And so how we do that is by ensuring that our guests have a phenomenal experience when they're here. And for us, we definitely want them to visit our businesses, to visit our mountains, but we're also very okay if they come to Aspen and they engage with another business. We kind of have this philosophy here, and it's for all the businesses in Aspen. When one of us wins, we all win. And if someone has an amazing time and they come back, somewhere during their journey, they're going to hit all of the businesses. And that's really what we want.
Yeah, I suppose that it's quite a challenge because the definition of leaving transformed means different things for different people. It strikes at the expectations at Aspen are super high. Like you're dealing with very diverse audience, people who've, this is their bucket list, something that they've saved up for. Others, it's their annual retreat. How do you cater for those diverse needs and also, I suppose, democratize a really high experience for everyone?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. I think the thing that we do and do really well is we treat everyone the same. And when I say the same, we treat them all with this very high level of service. So it can be your first time here and you could have saved up years for this vacation, or you flew in on your private jet and you're staying in your second or third home. It doesn't matter who you are. We want you to have the best vacation and the best time while you're here. And so I think it's that thing that once you get here, you're all special. Everyone's special that guests really, really love when they get here. And it's just in our ethos as a company to treat everyone the same. It doesn't matter if it does matter if you spend like $100,000 with us a year or not, but we're still gonna treat the people who spend less well. And then, the people who do spend a little bit more, they get extra special touches just because we know them. And, they're probably friends with people who work here at this point, and we have that relationship. So it's just making sure that we deliver on guest expectations at every point and to make sure that they walk away saying this was the best vacation I ever had.
Bring in Alex. Alex, we're kind of halfway through, so I'd love to kind of almost zoom upwards and kind of have some reflection at this midpoint before we switch gears, thinking about the other aspects of Aspen, which I'll touch on. So maybe your reflections in a broader context, and then maybe any follow-up questions for Katy.
Yeah, no, I mean, really fascinating stuff. And I think, Katy, what you said about how you treat customers is extremely important. I think you said something that's kind of nuanced, right? And that's very much in line with, for example, Peter Fader's idea of customer centricity and the idea that your customers are not all the same, right? I mean, first of all, people who come to Aspen, that's a special group, like somebody decided versus their local slope, right? So that granted, right, then you provide everybody with the same excellent level of service as a minimum, but then you have to go above and beyond for your special guests, right? For the ones that really they go above and beyond for you, you go above and beyond for them. And so that's understood as long as, like you said, everybody is treated with respect, is treated really well. You remove those obstacles. I mean, it reminds me of you have such perfect nature and such great experience to begin with. Your job is to just take away the friction, you know what I mean? It's
Really,
almost
yes,
like
yeah.
asking Michelangelo, how do you create those things? And he goes, I just take out the unnecessary stuff, right? Of the marble block.
No, I like that analogy. Yeah, I agree. You're already coming to such a special place that we don't need to do a lot except remove those frictions and make sure that you get to experience the place that all of us live and work here, love so much that's your experience as well.
Superb. Excellent. Well, I suppose thinking about how you deal with challenges, Katy, you've got the winter season, but also the summer season, and your product is the snow, and sometimes the snow isn't favorable, right? So how do you deal with seasonality and some challenges? And it seems that actually it presents an opportunity for Aspen as well.
Definitely. Yeah, it's both. We're lucky and we've been in business for over 75 years on the ski resort side. So at this point, we've seen every type of snow year you could possibly have ever seen. And we have some level of preparedness for it. We know that in a lower snow year that it doesn't matter what our guests, our NPS score is going to go down just because people come here and they expect powder for every single run, and that's just not always going to happen. But what it does do when we do start seeing that happen and we do start seeing those scores go down is we focus on other things. Like we focus on, we don't have fresh snow, but we got to make sure our grooming is top notch and everyone gets to have at least, a couple good groomed runs. Then we level up that guest service. That's when we start encouraging other things to do. Like, oh, you're kind of burnt out on skiing for 2 days. Maybe go take a snowmobile ride up to the Maroon Bells, which are iconic mountains that are just 8 miles away from downtown Aspen, and they're absolutely gorgeous. Or, you can go snowshoeing, or you can go experience shopping in downtown Aspen or go visit the Little Nell Spa. There's so much more to do. And so when we start seeing, a weaker snow year, we just really try to have it in our communications, and our employees are trained to it. Like, hey, why don't you go try something else? There's more to do here than just ski or snowboard. We're a fully rounded vacations resort.
I love that idea of expanding the experience, which is really phenomenal. But I suppose it's summer, you're almost flipping the canvas, right? So instead of skiing, it's something completely different as a value proposition. And it's quite interesting, like even from a team perspective, right? That pause between, I think it's actually around now, where you flip from the winter season to summer. And just tell us about that new canvas and the new value proposition that you guys communicate to your audiences.
Yeah, definitely. We actually are opening for summer this weekend. So we always start off in the States, it's Memorial Day weekend. That's always when we start spinning our gondolas again for summer visitation. It's a different product. You're doing different things, but you're still going to our mountains to experience nature and to engage with that mind, body, spirit type of philosophy. We have this saying for us locals that you come for the winter, but you stay for the summer. And that's very true of me, pretty much everyone I know. Our summer is a very magical time. The days are longer, the weather's literally perfect. It's dry here. It usually never gets above like 75 degrees. It's absolutely incredible. There's more activities to do. You can go hiking, you can go biking, and that biking is any sort of biking you want to do, mountain bike, road, gravel. You can go fly fishing, rafting. It's an outdoor adventurous playground here in the summertime. And so we've seen our visitation steadily increase over the years as more and more people discover how great the mountains are in the summertime. But yeah, it is a slightly different product, and we're speaking to a slightly different guest. It's less international guests who come here, and it's more like localized, like people from Colorado or closer by, California, Utah, who come here. So it is a slightly different guest, but still our philosophy is the same. We want you to go out into our mountains or stay at one of our hotels and then return home transformed to have had a great experience.
Superb. And I suppose the that taps into this evolving kind of very much environmental sustainability, which seems to be entwined in your customer experience. Could you talk about, it seems you guys have done things really innovative in your housing. Can you maybe just chat to that around some of the sustainable approaches that you have?
Yeah, we try to be sustainability is another one of our pillars of our business, and it's really, really important to who we are. Of course, if with winters getting warmer and warmer, it's our livelihood to protect the environment. So we really focus on that in a lot of different ways. But then internally, I think what you're speaking to is we have our environmental foundation, which we ask our employees if they would be willing to donate $1 a paycheck or as little as $1 a paycheck up to however much they want to donate. And then that actually goes into a fund that's a nonprofit. And then we are able to give grants to environmental requests like throughout the year. We do it twice a year. So it's really cool to give back to our community and to see our employees stepping up with donating their own money for these, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it adds up, through all of our employees throughout the year. And we're able to do some really incredible stuff with those donations. So that's a central part of who we are. We also focus on sustainability. Like I said, Aspen's a small place and it has a small footprint, and it's difficult to get enough people here to work, especially in an insane real estate market that Aspen is. So we also focus on having employee housing and building new employee housing. And when we do that, we build sustainable, zero green employee housing units. So it's just that environmental sustainability is just woven through every single part of our business and what we do. The patrol shack that's at the top of Aspen Highlands is fully run on solar power. It's a net green building as well. I believe so is the Sun Deck restaurant on the top of Aspen Mountain. So there's just a lot of small things that we do that's important to us that we try to be more environmentally friendly and conscious as a company.
Alex, and thank you so much for that, Katie. Alex, that really struck me, that innovation around contributing to the environment through your paycheck, right? But it feels that to get the standard of excellence, the buy-in from employees, like that seems the values are so aligned with employees, right? Wanting to give a symbolic dollar, and I'm sure others give more to actually contribute to the environment. That really speaks to a really clever approach to kind of get the team really involved in contributing to where they work.
Absolutely, and that's in line with what Katie said earlier about selecting the right people. I mean, hospitality is about the people, really, and luxury is about the people. So you select and I see the parallel between this and Danny Meyer's approach to hospitality when he talks about hiring people with this excellence drive or instinct, right? First and foremost, but then he talks about treating them as volunteers, but not in the sense that you don't pay them, in the sense that you expect that they have choices and they can leave at any time. So I think that's the idea, is not only do they stay, but they actually give back their part of their salary. I mean, this to me is the biggest kind of gesture of commitment, if you will.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just say I feel like our employees, one, we do have excellent employees, and I think this area draws in that specific type of person that's really employable here because you're coming here for the right reasons to experience nature, to be in the mountains. But we have, businesses that aren't in the mountains, and we still try to carry that philosophy forward and that ethos, for like our Denver Limelight hotel location, we still try to the people that we hire there, that like the environment is very, important and that, we need to be conscious and try to just elevate the world and the work we do so we can protect the places we love.
I really like that idea there. I suppose, Alex, you have observed at Zappos, the importance of the hiring process. Kitty's just talked about recruiting people that are one with the mission and the environment. Is that where the experience starts? Particularly if the experience is created by people, and maybe you talk to how Zappos in the early days approached that, just to kind of reflect on that point. I think it's a really important.
Absolutely, Chris. Yeah, I mean, this is again the early days of Zappos, and when Tony was, build the culture and build the company, and he built it on this realization that it's going to be customer service that sets it apart. It's not the same shoes you can buy at Nordstrom and elsewhere. So it was this counterintuitive thinking where everybody else was minimizing the costs and outsourcing and all that. He said, "We'll double down here." And when I joined Zappos, out of, at the time, 1,500 people, 900 were customer service that were called the customer loyalty team, because their mission was to create loyalty, right? Not to solve problems or to fix issues, but to create loyalty. And that's the idea. Is you hire people. Then it was a 4-week grueling process of new hire training, where you had to be there at 7 a.m. If you're late once, you're out. Right. And you go through all of that, and it's in the room. It doesn't matter if you were a VP somewhere else before or a barista, you were treated exactly the same. There were no titles, just first names. And the most iconic thing was at the end, once you pass this, then Tony and the executive team would come and give you the offer, meaning they would offer you money to leave, right? Because they didn't want people who felt they didn't have another option, right? So they would say, "We'll cover 3 months of your expenses," and every year one person or so would leave, but not too many. But that speaks to this idea of how you select the right people and how you treat them.
Super. I think you were going to add to that, or I suppose if not, we'll kind of go on to our final section of today's session.
Yeah, we can go on. I was just gonna say, wow, it's amazing. Oh, that's an amazing training program. We do have a training program, and it varies, across what business you're applying or working for, but that's an intense one for sure. But you get great employees out of it, and people who want to be there. So
Superb. Well, we're now at that point where we're trying to draw out the key principles and ideas just based on your reflections and experience, Katie. So we had talked through a few in advance. Do you want to just chat through, what were some of the kind of the key points if you're in a CX role today? We don't all have the beautiful mountains as our products, but what are the themes that we can then start applying into your businesses in the next week, in the next month, from a CX perspective?
yeah, I think that's a great question. And one for us in our program that's always kind of evolving too. For our CX program, it really started with our mountains and understanding, like how our guests were doing, what their experience was. And it started a long time ago back in the day with people on the mountains with Scantron sheets, and they would go up and they would fill out a customer survey on a Scantron sheet, and then we would get our NPS score and a couple other scores. And then, that evolved to more high-tech intercept surveys, which then has since COVID fully shifted to fully digital surveys, which also kind of shifted the way we were gathering guest feedback from intercept to post-stay. So in the past, I guess it's 5 years since COVID, we have this wealth of data of like how our guests feel after their stay. So we're now trying to kind of go back a little bit and really capture guest sentiment while they're in resort and what's going on there, especially if there's, any pain points that are happening while they're here. We want to address them in real time, like while they're still in resort versus sending, like, "I'm so sorry you had a bad experience. Can you tell me more about it? What is it we can do?" what can we do to get you back here? That's all good. And a core part of our customer experience program is guest recovery, but we're also now just trying to incorporate, like, how do we get to you while you're here, and how can you communicate us best so we can fix the issue? And then on top of that, the full guest experience cycle starts before they're even here. So they're a little bit newer, but we have our, online booking experiences. We want that guest experience journey to be seamless from the first time you land on our website and you're thinking about visiting us to when you return home at, a year, 6 months later. So we also have a few different surveys that we really look about the guest journey online and what they're experiencing. And if that's reflective, that online journey is reflective to the promise that we make to you when you're in resort. So we're trying to really get those two to be similar. So that's the process of our customer experience program right now, is really expanding and building on capturing guest sentiments before and when they're in resort. And we do that across the ski resort and our hotel properties as well.
And Katie, one question on that. I assume you connect all the dots, right? Because these are different systems. These are usually, that's kind of a pain point for any business, right? You have your legacy business, and then you have your online, and then it has its own technology. Are you trying to connect the dots and know that this is the person who booked online, and then this is the person who said something at the hotel and afterwards?
Yep, that omnichannel experience. Like, we're really diving into that data and really getting the back end software in place so we can paint that full picture. We have a pretty good picture of it now, but it's, every year better technology comes out so we can really tie that together. And yeah, that's a huge part of our mission, and our goal is to know, like, hey, they booked online, at one of our hotel properties, and then they bought lift tickets, but they haven't bought rentals, and they came 2 years ago in the summer. So it's that whole guest profile that we are really interested in. And it's truly so we can offer that guest better customer service when they get here. So we know what they like, what they want to do, and how we can deliver on their expectations better.
And Alex, does that talk to that point where you were talking about that? We talk about omni-channel, but really we're talking about, how can you interact with the brand digitally before you reach? But it seems that there's a post experience as well where you can keep in touch with the customer as well. Is that the true experience, Alex, where you can connect all those things?
Yeah, of course, Chris. And my point was more on the tactical technology side, because if you don't connect the dots, right, you can collect dots, but if you don't connect them, you have little, and especially longitudinal. I think this is, Katie, to me, that's one of the big lessons, is the longitudinal view of things, not just the snapshots in time. And because your experience is much more curated, it makes sense. But the question here is, for any business, how do you take that and scale it? How do you take that idea of hospitality, that's a lot of it is physical experiences? How do you make it digital through AI and all that stuff? And especially, Katie, I was really intrigued by what you said, like, how do you understand the experience while they're there? And it's a matter of sensing, right? It's a matter of, did they try to call somebody 3 times, right? That's data, right? If you have a mobile app, did they try to reach you? Did they look angry when they walked around, right? I mean, it's hard to capture with the view of privacy and all that, but it's an interesting thing to innovate on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's definitely a focus for us, trying to mimic that experience that you have while you're here online. And I would assume, maybe wrongfully so, that that's what all businesses are trying to do. And that's where UX designers really come in, and why it's so closely tied to customer experience, is you're trying to convey this wonderful experience online from wherever anyone is sitting, in their home, on their train into work in the morning, so I think it's really a lofty thing to try to do, but it's something we're really trying to be proactive about. And I would be lying if I said we were all the way there yet, but we're working on it, and it is important to us. But yeah.
It's interesting, Alex. You remember our discussion with the Michelin star restaurant where they were kind of anti-scale, because to achieve excellence, it's quite hard to do that. But it seems that Katie and the team have been able to crack that. Could you maybe, that's the balance, right? And that's a challenge for any business. How do you keep the magic sauce and the experience as you scale? But it seems that Aspen have got that balance just right.
Was that, sorry, I thought that was a question for Alex. Is that a question for
It's a
me?
question for Alex, so I was going to bring in Alex there just
Oh
to.
no, yeah, sorry. I assumed it was Katie. So that's not the dynamic of having three people on the call. No, I absolutely. I think that's the holy grail is how you take that and then scale it through technology. But Katie, you'll be surprised how many businesses don't really. I mean, they create digital experiences, but many times they don't think about, okay, what's the actual physical experience and the emotions that we wanna, right, to mimic or to generate, right? It's you develop a certain set of functionality. That's what you do, right? And then you make it easy. But that leap, okay, now what would be a real life equivalent to that is not something that everybody does.
Yeah, and it feels that, by owning category of emotion, right, that a feeling of leaving transformed is very differentiated, right? Who could compete against that, where it's an emotion that is felt by your customers? And if they're owning the category of joy, for example, then that's truly differential from an experience. So that's quite interesting. I suppose just to sum up, Katie, some principles that our listeners can maybe take away, thinking about how you define for your version of that parking lot to lift. So what is that bottleneck in your business that could be reducing the time to really accelerate that? Seems that you're embedding feedback loops at every touch point of the journey, and that's really, really important. And that information is being shared by your employees. So it feels that solutions are co-created, not, pushed down from top. We heard about the importance of training. So you train for empathy, not just process. So being able to color outside the lines and solve for problems in the moment. And it feels that you're really using customer insights to orchestrate for emotion, not just for problem solving. And you have a real consistency of to focus on delight and those moments that really matter for your customers. So just to get your final reflections, Katie, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your expertise. You have a world-class CX program. It's so amazing that you've taken the time to share that with our audience. So we're super, super grateful. But I'll maybe just get you to sum up, some of the key things from your perspective, and what advice would you offer for people thinking about either, creating their first CX program or leveling up to the Aspen standard?
Yeah, definitely. I think you summed it up really well. I think sometimes with CX programs, people create a survey and they think, okay, it's set, it's done. But I think surveys have to be an ongoing evolution. For us, every season is a little bit different. So every season, our survey is just a little bit different, not too different because we still like to get our historical year-over-year data. But, it's how can we meet our guests where they are this season and really get those insights that we need? You mentioned that we met at X4, so we partner with Qualtrics, and I think Qualtrics is a really great tool that kind of allows you to evolve your surveys with your guest or your product and like what you're trying to achieve. So that's been really important with us. So I would just encourage everyone to, really be thoughtful about your surveys and think about, the different ways you can deliver surveys to your customers or your guests. And I would say, and this is probably counterintuitive to a lot of the rhetoric online, but like, don't be afraid to ask your guests questions. Our main winner survey, our general survey is huge. And I would think inadvisably so, but we have a really high completion rate. And when you have an engaged customer or guest, they will tell you about their experience. So I would encourage people not to be afraid to ask the questions and, like, oh, it has to be under 20 questions or it has to be 3 questions. Like I would test that before, like if you really want to ask 12 and then kind of monitor those completion rates from there.
And I think what I'm hearing is also like the power is actually in the answer you get from your customers. So they're telling you what the answer is, right? Which is the biggest takeaway, right? So
Yeah, I think that's actually probably the hardest thing to do in designing a survey is asking the right questions so you get that meaningful feedback that you can actually do something with instead of, just being like, oh, people are like 95% satisfied. You're like, yeah, but what are the 5% unsatisfied with and what can we learn from that?
yeah, and I love that position of learning and being open to change. Alex, over to you. Just to sum up, I suppose we had a real focus on hospitality, opening the lens for new insights into building trust with our customers. We've just heard from Katy. We'd love just to get your concluding thoughts on the Aspen experience and broader lessons.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Katie. Really insightful, really great points here. And I mean, I would only say that every business should be striving to be like Aspen in the sense that, create that experience, create that spirit of hospitality and try to scale it through, if it's a digital business, how do you do that digitally? But to me, the what is how do you get to that level of service and experience?
Superb. Well, look, thank you so much, Katy. Really appreciate you taking time to join Trust Builders. And for you, our audience, thank you for taking time to stop by. It was certainly packed full of insight and actionable takeaways. And I look forward to speaking to you in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks again now. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Trust Builders podcast, brought to you by Adoreboard.